Hi there, and welcome to yet another installment of What the is going on? Because we've had another one of those. Now, I've been under the weather lately, and yesterday I thought that maybe I was having a fever dream. You know, one of the ones where, while you're in them, all the small bits seem to make sense, but when you try to put it together well, then the entire thing's just one jumbled mess and nothing really makes sense. Turns out, though, I was just watching the media from the meeting in Washington. Now, there's long been work towards a minerals deal between the US and Ukraine because, well, the US has refused repeatedly to offer any security guarantees to Ukraine in the case of a peace agreement with Russia, or, well, that's what they said. And then Ukraine made the move to get the US involved in Ukraine so that it would be in the American interest for peace to continue in Ukraine, that a war, another continuation of the war with Russia, would be against American interests. And one of those ways would be to include them in the, well, digging up the minerals in Ukraine and processing them. Because, well, the US needs those minerals and Ukraine has them. And, well, once they get them, they would like to keep getting them. So another war would be against US interests, which would probably keep Russia in place because they really don't want America to interfere directly. So that makes sense. It would be a win-win situation. And Trump, being the greedy bastard that he is, grabbed the chance and decided to turn Ukraine into a colony, or a vassal state, call it what you want. He wanted 500 billions worth of minerals from Ukraine as payment for services already rendered, which would be worth about 100 billion or possibly less, depending on how you calculate it. And then he wanted more than that. And of course, that deal just went out the window. Of course, Ukraine didn't accept that. Then they tried again with the deal that was almost as bad. And then the EU, apparently, or according to rumors, intervened and offered Ukraine a fairly good deal for those minerals. Probably not to actually get the minerals, probably more to give some kind of reference point for the Americans to negotiate against, because they would need to match this deal or come up with something even better if they wanted that deal. Otherwise, it would make no sense for Ukraine to go with the American deal. And that seems to have worked. Rumors are that the current agreement would consist of a fund in Ukraine where Ukraine would have to match any donation from the US, would have to be matched into this fund, which would then, after the war, after the end of hostilities, would be used to improve the areas where the mining is going to take place. So improve the facilities for the mining companies, which would primarily be American. So US financial interests would be tied to not having a war going on in Ukraine. And Ukraine would have work done, people would be working, and the minerals would be dug up and sold to the Americans probably, and it would be a win-win for both parties here. Yeah, would be. But it seems that someone didn't want that deal, because it was supposed to be signed yesterday at a meeting in Washington, D.C. between Donald Trump and Zelensky, where they would go over the final details and sign the deal. So as they always do, you have a meet the press where they take some photos, then they have the meeting, and then they have another press event where they present the results as, here is our signed deal. And that was a bit odd yesterday because it started normal. It started with Trump being gracious host, picking Zelensky up at the car and going with him to the Oval Office. And there they would have some photos taken, possibly a few questions, but only that. And then the journalists started asking questions. I use the air quotes because the first journalist is Marjorie Taylor Greene's boyfriend, or Marjorie Trader Greene's boyfriend. And he started immediately insulting the clothes that Zelensky was wearing. yes, Zelensky made it quite clear that when the war started, he dropped the suit and he won't pick it up until the hostilities end, because he won't be a politician in that one. He is the leader of a nation at war, which makes sense. It's symbolic. But yeah, the journalists apparently didn't like that. Well, journalists. And he attacked him on that. And of course, Zelensky bit back. When you're the leader of a nation, you have to do that. You can't be humiliated like that. It just doesn't work. But he bit back with dignity and humor, and nothing really came of that. And then the questions continued, and things went completely sideways. Because suddenly J.D. Vance, the catchfucker himself, interjected and attacked Zelensky for not being grateful enough, for not basically being on his knees and crying and thanking Trump for the deliveries, for the help they've made. And mind you, Trump hasn't delivered anything other than what Biden already started. He hasn't added anything to it. He's actually been a bit of a problem in this regard and threatened to stop the already assigned help. So why would he be thanking Trump? But he has been thanking Trump. Well, not Trump himself, but America, for the help they've been provided. He's shown a lot of gratitude in that regard. He's always said, we can always need more help, but we're thankful for what we've gotten. But that's not enough, according to J.D. Vance. Again, the way he attacked Zelensky couldn't just leave it be. He had to set the record straight. He didn't really bite back, but he tried to set the record straight. And that sent Trump completely off the rails, which is a bit odd. We'll get to that later. And he started hounding and pounding together with J.D. Vance and basically telling Zelensky that his nation was nothing, that they couldn't handle themselves and they should just shut up and do as he's told. He didn't use those words, but that was implied, that they would be helpless without American help, which is far from true. He also kept using that 350 billion number that he always uses, which is very, very far from the truth. Less than a third of that, very likely. Again, depending how you count. And also, the weapons currently used in Ukraine, 30% of those are American. 30% are European, and the rest is built in Ukraine. So they make a lot of itself, and the American help is very, very valuable for Ukraine. But they could very likely do without. It would be bloody, it would be really messy, but they could probably do without. So, yeah. But that mess just went on and on and on. Zelensky trying to set the record straight, trying to, with a lot of dignity, defend himself against these attacks. And then suddenly Trump seems to think that he had enough fodder for the journalists that were present, and the entire mess could be televised and stuff like that. So he cut it off, and then they went back to, normal business, which is again odd once you have this. It was almost yelling and screaming. It was very, very aggressive from Trump and Vance. Especially Vance was very aggressive. And then it just suddenly stopped. And this entire thing's odd, because what then happened was that they were supposed to have dinner, and then the meeting and the next press event. But the dinner didn't even take place. Trump asked Zelensky to just go, leave, which he of course did, under protest, but he did. So the deal was never signed, and that's probably the important part here. But it seems that someone didn't want that deal to go through. And that matches up with Vance and the people around him. Vance has basically said during the election that he doesn't give a flying fuck about Ukraine and that Russia can do whatever they want. He seems pro-Russian. It's that bad. And again, to get negotiations to collapse like this doesn't seem like Trump. Trump is a simple man. The intellectual level of a fifth grader, if we're being nice and not towards the fifth graders. One of his Wharton professors said very clearly that Trump was the phrase, the most goddamn stupid student I've ever had. And repeated rumors say that Trump only got his degree because, well, daddy bought it for him. Trump is not a smart man. He's not a subtle man. If he wanted the deal gone, he would just say, well, no deal, probably. People around him, though, are slightly cleverer than that, and Vance is, well, he's a lawyer. Lawyers are sometimes assholes, but they're very, very rarely really stupid. There are counterexamples to that, but usually they aren't outright stupid. And Vance doesn't want this deal, and the people around Vance and some people around Trump doesn't want that. And getting everything to collapse like this seems more like Vance than it does Trump. So that would be my guess, that that's what happened. Someone wanted this deal gone, and this was a way to get it. And who benefits the most from that? Well, that would be the Russians. So also, maybe Agent Krasnov did his work this time. We can't know for sure. But we can know that what Vance did was very, very undiplomatic and definitely crashed this thing. Trump following up, yeah, well, that's just Trump, I guess. He's, again, not a sophisticated man. So where do we go from this? Well, we don't actually quite know. There's supposed to be a meeting today this afternoon, between Zelensky and Keir Starmer in London, but that meeting was postponed, according to rumors, to pull in a lot of people from around Europe to discuss the security situation. So there's not just the UK and Ukraine that discuss this, but more or less the entire EU, as well as the European part of NATO, that discuss this. So there's a lot of support for Zelensky immediately after these events. Almost every single head of state in Europe has been out to support Zelensky, except of course for Viktor Orban, but well, we all know where he is. And Robert Fico also just kept his mouth shut. Orban decidedly sided with Trump and Russia and stuff like that. Again, no surprise. And Fico just kept his mouth shut. Everyone else has been out to support Ukraine. So it seems like maybe the US has made their position very clear, and they seem to be siding with Russia. Well, not the US, but the leadership of the US. The Republican Party, with Trump and Vance at the helm, definitely seem to be siding with Russia. Does the EU just fold and allow Russia to do their conquest? I highly doubt it, but that remains to be seen. Which means we're probably going to get more of these what the fuck is going on, because a lot of stuff is probably going to happen, and I'll be back then if something related to this or something equally what is going to happen. So I'll see you then.